Good evening, everybody. You're joining Wendy and Trudy. We are running a compliance webinar this evening. I'm hoping that you see the one single screen leading into what we're going to talk about. This is part of the Methodist Church of New Zealand's webinar series regarding property and insurance and wellness and safety. We're recording this webinar this evening, and relevant information along with the recording will be made available on the website tomorrow. You're welcome to ask questions and post them as you think about them. We'll try and answer those questions as we're speaking tonight. Wendy Anderson is the Property and Insurance Manager for the Methodist Church. She's been with the church for over 5 years now, and she has a background in insurance and investigations as well as property management. I'm the Wellness, Safety and Risk Advisor for the Methodist Church of New Zealand, and I've been with the church since 2017. So this will be coming into my fourth or fifth year. It doesn't seem like it. We've been interrupted by COVID. So my background is in government compliance, and I've held roles in private companies, for-profit and not-for-profit, obviously. So on your screen with your Zoom webinar down the bottom is a Q&A button, and that is the one that I recommend you use for posting your questions. Rather than using the chat, please use the Q&A. So today we'll be talking about building management compliance. Two areas to look at is the governing bodies that are actually putting the compliance in place, and then the building stages that the Methodist Church uses, which the compliance then is placed against. So Wendy.
So we're having a look at the governing bodies, and the reason that we have compliance is because of the restrictions or the processes that have been put in place. Now, with building, generally the Regional and Environmental Council and the local council or our central council would be the main governing body over any building projects that require a consent. Regional and environmental councils require the resource consent and come under the Resource Management Act, but so does the local council as well. And the local council would issue the building consent. Heritage New Zealand are also another governing body that with heritage buildings especially, they will require consultation and also the provision of their advice and their processes regarding heritage buildings. There's a lot of restrictions on heritage buildings and protection, and that is why Heritage New Zealand and some parts of the local councils exist. We have a governing body, or we have the Department of Internal Affairs, and they are part of, or the Fire and Emergency New Zealand, or FENZ, come under the Department of Internal Affairs. And then under MB, or the Ministry of Business and Innovation and Employment, come WorkSafe, Tenancy Services, the Building Act 2004, Earthquake and Seismic Strengthening, and Earthquake and Seismic Strengthening. Now, we thought we'd also add the Ministry of Justice because of the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering Financing of Terrorism Act 2009 and the restrictions or the requirements for conveyancing work, buying and selling houses and lease agreements that prove that the funds that are being received or spent are not to be to finance terrorism or for anti-money laundering. So there's also, as I've said, the Building Act 2004. There's the Resource Management Act, the Building Earthquake-Prone Buildings Amendment Act 2016, and most recently FENZ, which is the Fire and Emergency New Zealand, which is the Fire Safety Evacuation Procedures and Schemes and their Regulations 2018, and the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015. So the Connectional Office interprets all of this law, all of these restrictions, all of these compliance conditions into a way that can be followed much more easily by the entities of Methodist Church New Zealand. So if we have a look at the building stages where different compliances take place or need to be adhered to, we start with the concept stage. So the concept stage is where you've got an idea, you go to an architect, you put it on paper, and you have a concept plan, which is a rough outline of what you're hoping to achieve. The next process is through to the consent stage, awarding the tenders are invited and a contract's awarded, work commences, and then through to finishing the defects liability period, practical completion and practical completion. Sorry, I've got that round the wrong way. And so we commence, it's in process, in progress, there could be variations. And when we finish, there's a practical completion. We'll talk about that soon. Defects liability and then the ongoing maintenance or repairs or compliance that's required. So the larger projects need MC or anything that is over $50,000 in value, any project over $50,000 plus GST, or it requires a resource or building consent will require MCPC approval. Where there's a uniting parish, it will also require the approval of the other denomination. MCPC would like to see applications for approval at 3 stages of the project. The first stage is the concept stage, and they will run their eye over the plans and come up with suggestions or not, because that is the stage where it's the cheapest to change any plans that you have in place. So you would apply for the consent plans to be approved so that the parish, or you can move on to working drawings, lodge the building consent. So produce the working drawings. The next stage will be for the consent approval. So you would ask that the working drawings are approved and that the consent can be lodged and that tenders can be sought, or the parish can invite tenders. Once the consent is lodged and the tenders have been processed and a contractor has been selected, that goes back to MCPC for approval. So that would have have all of the costs tightened up and the plans finalised, approved, ready to go. So the parish would have a better idea of what the project's going to cost. So most of our buildings are in the ongoing stage. Any building project will go through the other stages, which will all have different compliance requirements. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So the concept stage. This is where you select your project manager. It's a good time to have a project manager on board right now, because they have a great understanding of what's required to get this project off the ground. And they also may have in mind that the consultants that would be suited for this project. So you're going to select your architect, and if it's a heritage listed building, then you'll be wanting to have a heritage architect. They know their way into the council process and the consent process, and they know what the council will require. You're going to want an idea of the cost, so you might decide that on the concept plans you're going to get the quantity surveyor on board and get them to price up to give you a reasonable idea of what the cost could be. You require a fire consultant, geotech engineer, and you may want to consult with local iwi. This is also where the strategic plan for the parish comes into play. This is where MCPC want to see the strategic plan to ensure that this project fits in with the parish's vision. Is it going to suit their needs? Can they afford it? Who's going to pay for it? Where's the funding coming from? All of those things that our MCPC will want to know so that they can give it the rubber stamp or make some suggestions, or the parish may actually need to come back with further information. So when you're enlisting your architect, you might want to look at your wish list, and you might want to think about things that for the future. Where you're building a parsonage, you may decide that you would like wider halls. This could also be corridors with offices off it in the new hall or church. So that can reduce future maintenance and lower ongoing costs after the build. Disability access, doorways, facilities is the access, that needs to be considered. And just even where the heat pump units are placed for future safe maintenance. We've learned some lessons from COVID as well, and perhaps we may even be implementing some of the things that have impact, or to mitigate some of the things that have impacted from COVID. But I'll let Trudy talk to you about that.
So yeah, we're never going to escape COVID. Some of the things that I've noticed for good buildings and buildings that have had to work a little bit harder is separate areas. That if you have separate areas, they will need separate ventilation system, because you don't want to mix your spaces when it comes to COVID. That you have a space for notice boards, not just all the notices in one place. You may need a separate space to give a status for the building. So you want your notices to be able to stand out. The separate areas will need separate exit and entry, separate facilities, again, just to ensure that degree of separation. That if you want to be broadcasting the same Zoom session or service into the different areas, that your audio-visual wiring would need to be set up as early as possible, so that you're not trying to retrofit your wiring into an existing building. And even little things like making sure you've got an area for hand sanitisation stations. In the future, it may be that it's this version of COVID or the next 3 or the next 4 versions. I suspect that hand sanitisation is going to be with us for quite a while. So not having it stuck in the middle of a foyer or a walk space, if you've got the ability to plan it in now, then I'd suggest that you look at it. The other thing too with the concept stage is this is when you have your asbestos management plan. This is not necessarily the full-on where exactly everywhere is asbestos, but it's your generalisation of where asbestos is in your building, where it might be. And with that information, it helps you plan what it is that you want to do. If you're only going to work on one room, say the hall, and you discovered that the same ceiling material is used in the corridor, then you may wish to plan for work to occur in the corridor as well. So knowing where asbestos is in your buildings at the concept stage helps you plan better.
So I wanted to have a quick look at resource consents. And a lot of people don't quite understand what a resource consent means. And it's basically anything that is going to be outside the district plan requirements, building requirements. It might be the height of the building, it could be the roof line, it could be anything, or it could be a heritage building. So the Christchurch Basilica is a Catholic basilica, and it's down Barbados Street in Christchurch. It was badly damaged, as you can see, in the earthquake, and the Catholic diocese purchased land in the central business district of Christchurch, and they wanted to have their central precinct, their Catholic precinct positioned in central Christchurch. So when they went lodged their building consent for the demolition of this building, it didn't come up against the public opinion or pushback as the Christchurch Cathedral had. But then again, a lot of people say that the Christchurch Cathedral is an icon for Christchurch. You know, it's part of the identity of Christchurch, a bit like the Auckland Bridge. So they went through the process, and because they had a plan in place as to how they were going to manage their new church, and it was all set up. I believe that it helped their the decision to approve a resource consent. Now, this cost the church $3 million for the resource consent, and if you may think, well, that is a lot of money for a resource consent, but in actual fact, if they had to fix this building, you just need to look at the cracks in that room that's exposed on the ground floor, on the first floor as well, and in that block work, the cost, I know with the Christchurch Cathedral, they were looking at around $200 million to repair, and I'd say that to build a church that big and pretty flash, you'll be looking at around 15 million. So there's a huge difference with heritage buildings. But I just wanted to cover resource consents. The consent process, and this is where if you have a heritage building, your heritage architect is worth their weight in gold to get this through consent. And once again, there's that compliance. It has to comply with the district plan, and also all of the requirements of the Building Act 2004. It may be with a heritage building as well that you want an archaeological consultant to be on site when the ground is broken, or when any ground is exposed. And MCPC will also be wanting to approve the working drawings for the consent process, and they will want you to start inviting tenders, which can, especially in today's climate with COVID, may allow you to get those costs firmed up.
This is,
so if we look,
oh, sorry.
No, that's right.
This is also where we move on one stage to with the asbestos management, and that we now call for a refurbishment or demolition survey. So this is specifically intruding into the building. So you don't just take the surface layer and go, does that contain asbestos or not? You then say, if we're demolishing this wall, is there anything inside the wall that may contain asbestos? So you're doing intrusive testing within the building. Part of that process falls under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and you need to start posting the results of what does or does not contain asbestos. The easiest thing to do is to make copies of the original management plan and any surveys that you do thereafter, publicly post them somewhere safe within the building. When I say safe from the weather and the wind and the water, so that any contractors coming onto site can see it. Wendy, sorry.
No, that's okay. But so we'll move on to construction projects now, and that is just explaining about that process for construction projects. So that is also in bricks and mortar, this diagram, and when you're inviting tenders too, you need to assess your contractor. It's very important that they have good practice, and that they are well aware of the requirements of the legal requirements for building, and that they are also going to work within the health and safety requirements as well. But Trudy, you might want to talk about the health and safety process in construction projects.
Yep. So when you pre-qualify your contractors, it can be as simple as asking, are all of their workers vaccinated, that vaccination passes are required to work on any of our projects. You can ask them for their health and safety experience, whether they've had any WorkSafe prosecutions, and the results of those, if they have any professional associations or memberships that are relevant to health and safety. WorkSafe provide a pre-qualification questionnaire, which I'll make available with the webinar information. And it just asks about their health and safety policy, their subcontractors who they might subcontract out some of the work, whether they've got information on their training and supervision processes, whether they've got emergency procedures available, risk assessments, accident investigation, whether they do health monitoring. When you think about demolition companies, health monitoring is quite important, particularly for hearing and lungs, because of the noise they make and the dust that they create. So knowing that they're looking after their workers is quite a good thing. Now, with this particular diagram of construction projects, we are the client. We're not the workers on site, and we don't necessarily know what issues the contractor and subcontractor are going to bring on board when they start their work. So part of this diagram is that we have a duty to coordinate and cooperate with all of the parties that work on site. One of the key ones to this sort of process, I know that Wellington Parish, when they did their earthquake strengthening, Carol Dale, who manages or administers the parish, she was right on board attending meetings with everybody just to work out what was going on. She didn't have to be an expert at construction, but because she got involved, she could then help out, post signage where it was needed, keep the parish informed about where they should or shouldn't go, and generally building that knowledge from what the contractors could tell her was exactly the right thing. She learned and participated in the process between the contractors, subcontractors, and the consultants that were on site. So when we have overlapping duties, if we're keeping part of our building open while subcontractors and contractors are in another part, then if you've got shared access points, that's an overlap of duties, and you really need to clarify what the process should be so that nobody's getting in the way of anybody else. Just because we hire a consultant or a really good contractor, it doesn't remove our responsibilities of being involved and coordinating how everything works. If you want more details on this, we did cover it in the June webinar from last year regarding standards of care, or you can give me a call about it if you like.
So the third stage, and this is the last stage that MCPC are involved in the approval processes, the tender and the awarding the contract, selecting the contractor, and the contract is drawn up. So this requires MCPC approval. And MCPC just want to tick for the very last time those firmed up costs. So up-to-date costs. With COVID, everything is going up as you speak. So if you can lock into a contract earlier, it's always better. But of course, it's very difficult until you've got the consent process through and also you've selected your contractor. And they won't be wanting to see the original estimates. They will want those costs to be completely firmed up, because otherwise you're opening a can of worms if you haven't decided, if you don't have an agreement with the contractor regarding what the project is actually going to cost. Of course, there are some unknowns, as Trudy said, asbestos is one of them. But what I would expect at that stage, if there's the survey for asbestos would have been done, and the cost to remove that safely would have been determined, and is included in those in the costs. MCPC will want to know where that funding's coming from to pay for the project. How's the parish going to pay for it? Will there be a loan? What's that loan going to be? And they'll also want to know that this fits within the strategy for the parish. So the mission or the vision for the parish, how they propose to grow and how they see their future, is all part of the building project as well. It's not just a matter of wanting a new building if you've got a diminishing congregation. And just one other thing, when the contract's drawn up, the Construction Contracts Act 2002 provides a process for dealing with payments and disputes within the construction contract. So the next stage, once you've awarded you pick the contractor, you're going to work out a time that they're going to start, and you're going to commence work. So, or they're going to commence work. And at that stage, before the commencement of work, you would be wanting to call me to arrange contract works insurance, and our underwriting agent, Concordia, makes that arrangement for us. And I'll give you the forms to complete for the contract to complete. There might be hot work, a hot work permit required if there's going to be any hot work to be done, or any welding, pipes welding or steel. That's when that health and safety, or that document comes into play. So it may be that area has to be monitored for half an hour after the hot works is completed or finished. That part of the work is finished. Site health and safety hazards, they need to be identified at this stage as well. You could also have the archaeological consultant on board too, to be checking or there as the ground is broken for foundations, etc. And to ensure that it isn't an archaeological site. You need your engineer sign-offs, your public liability. The contractor requires a public liability to cover what could happen. And it's a good idea to think about storage. So you might have all of the pews, you might have the lectern, the organ, all sorts of things that might need storage out of the way, so that there's no damage to that furniture or the fittings for the church. And the compliance at this stage for the governmental compliance is the Health and Safety at Work Act, the local council sign-offs, and of course the Construction Contracts Act as well. And Trudy spoke about Carol Dale in Wellington, and it's just how close that they were working. So the church was adjacent to where Carol was actually working at the time, and so the health and safety plan is necessary if you're still on or near the site during construction process. And of course, the storage is important to avoid dust damage when the building works is going on. Once work started and in progress, there's ongoing health and safety hazards and there's ongoing health and safety processes. You cannot just walk on site whenever you feel like it, whether it's a residential or a commercial property that's under where construction is underway. And everybody still has to adhere to the health and safety guidelines and requirements. So the regulatory systems for commercial matters Amendment Act 2017 was put in place new requirements for the protection of retentions. So where there's that although this speaks about variations, all invoices must be sent through me for payment from the Church Building and Loan Fund. If you have funds in the MTA, you may decide that you want to talk to the fund administrator and have an amount of cash transferred over at different times so that you can pay the accounts yourselves, and you can also look after the GST. So variations happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes it is that different things are found once part of the building is demolished or removed, and it could be that the ideas have changed, that what was a good idea is no longer seen as a good idea, or that someone's come up with a better idea on how they want a part of the building to look. Asbestos and ground conditions can also play a part in variations, and and that's generally why there's a contingency, usually around 10%, 10 to 15%, that is factored into the costs for the project. Of course, it may not be required. A project manager is worth their weight in gold for managing the site, managing the materials, and the health and safety requirements on site, and that everyone is adhering to those. They will also be scrutinising any variations, and I would expect all invoicing to go through the project manager before it either goes to the parish for approval, so that they can agree that it's fair and reasonable for the work that's been done. Variations can be a can of worms. And also the original scoping documents and the tender contract documents and plans, the robustness of these documents also comes into play when work is underway. So as Al said, payments go through me, through the CBNL fund, and therefore there's an auditable paper trail, and there is, once work is in progress, there are also reasons that a site can be shut down, and it could be the principal or a health and safety representative that could be involved in that. But Trudy, you might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so thinking back to that diagram about us as the principal, the client, and working with subcontractors, contractors, and the consultants, each of us have a duty to perform when it comes to health and safety. So I know that a parish in the Lower North Island Synod shut down one of their sites because there was a gas smell on site. So they did the responsible thing and shut the site down for the day. There's also, if the contractor is large enough, they should have health and safety representatives on site. Those are workers who have done an extra course, if you like, and it is their responsibility to determine if the work is safe or not to perform. And if it's not safe, they have a legal responsibility, and they've got the delegated authority to shut the site down until that particular matter gets sorted, whether it's physically changing how things are being done or whether it's a systemic issue that management needs to sort out. The health and safety representative has the legal authority to shut the site down until it's safe to continue. As Wendy said, asbestos can also be discovered once surfaces have been removed. So if you are demolishing a wall, you may discover asbestos that you weren't expecting, and that will create a variation that you need to shut the site down until the hazard of the asbestos is dealt with. So in our webinar in August last year, we went through this with the asbestos management plan, and that as a project or as the building progresses through its renovations and demolitions, refurbishments, you will then survey each section as you work your way through it to determine the asbestos content and get it dealt with safely. So just be aware that if your building is aged anywhere from 1920s through to early 2000s, there's a likelihood that asbestos is going to be in there, which will require additional work during your building project.
When the project is finished, or it's finished to the degree that it's going to get signed off by council, we enter into the practical completion phase. It's always good to get to the practical completion stage, but it doesn't mean that it's going to get compliance. And we're looking at the stage at the client signing off. They're happy with the work. There will be a defects meeting, and the people that I would expect to attend that defects meeting will be the contractor, the architect, the project manager, the property secretary for the parish, or you might decide might be one or two of you, and also the council you may decide to tie it in with the council's code of compliance meeting at the same time. So this is where the defects are recorded, and you don't want to have too many people at this meeting, but you do want to have the people there that are going to recognise the defects as being defects, and also be able to practically look at them and find a remedy for them. This is where the construction producer statements, the PS1 to PS4, are produced by those subcontractors, and the PS is a document issued by a producer statement author. So one of the engineers, electrician, plumber, they would have to provide a PS statement or producer statement for the completed work. So they're signing off their work, and it gives evidence that design or building work complies or will comply with the building code, and helps us to make a decision, or the council to make a decision to issue the code of compliance certificate. So the completion certificates, electrical, gas, plumbing, fire, mechanical, that's what is required there, and also the asbestos removal clearance certificates. If there's a practical completion, but there may be one thing that is going to stop the code of compliance, and it could be that materials are not available, it might even just be the drive, then the local council may issue a licence to occupy. It may be that they decide, no, you have to have code of compliance before you can occupy. You need that driveway down. You're not going to be driving through mud, or that has to be finished. This once code of compliance, as the council have advised that the code of compliance will be issued, and it has been issued, then you'll be looking at a building title. Should you have built multiple buildings on one site, you'll be looking at the building title to be issued then. Those PS documents lead us onto the building warrant of fitness stage as well, and they sit within the continual warrant of fitness process, or building inspections to confirm that their building remains compliant. Everything's working as it should be, and but Trudy's going to talk about the building warrants of fitness and what's required with those, because it's not a complicated process, but it does require constant monitoring and also other people to be involved.
And it's a process that not huge amounts of people are familiar with. Most people have heard of it, but being familiar with it is another thing altogether. Not every building, is required to have a building warrant of fitness. So some of you can breathe a sigh of relief. You don't have to get into that process.
That's exactly right. And yeah, I was going to say something, I've forgotten what it does. So we've got the defects liability period now. You've got your house, or you've got your new hall or new church, or it's all completed. Well, generally it's a 12-month defects liability period, and this is where the contractor can return to the site to fix any defects, and it may have been defects that were determined at the practical completion, and that could be that they are waiting for materials to replace what has been used, or it may be damaged. We don't know. It could be anything, but any defects. This is when the contractor has the opportunity to fix those, and that's also a good opportunity for the users of the building to identify any issues that they discover once you start using the building, because sometimes things are not evident until you go to use them. It might be the dishwasher. We had a brand new dishwasher installed that flooded the church just at Christmas time. So it's very interesting. Something new isn't always fully working. I know with the connection office, we're still picking up things 4 years later that still need someone to come and sort. And I think probably our security system has been the most problematic. That and the sparkling water tap. Not that that's high on the priority list. And the other thing is retention. So retentions are kept back, a percentage of the progress payments are kept back for retentions. This is your leverage, and you do not pay these until the end of the the defects liability period, and you're happy that everything is working and fine and you're happy with the job. And the other thing is that different contracts may have different defect liability periods, so that it may be 6 months, it may be 12, but generally it's 12 months.
Yeah, so this is not a guarantee or a warranty period, is it? It's just for identification of defects?
That's right, and to give the contractor the opportunity to come back and fix them.
Right.
The closer to the practical completion time, the better, to get the contractor in, because they lose a bit of interest once they've got most of their money. So it is the best opportunity to actually get them back, fix it, and then you'll be happy. Now, after the defects liability period, or after you start using the building, there are ongoing compliance processes and costs that need to be adhered to. With the Tenancy Services Act, if it's a rental property, then you need to be providing everything that is required with healthy homes, and that covers insulation, long life battery smoke alarms or hardwired smoke alarms. So a smoke alarm that has a long life, and also the position of those smoke alarms, that they are within a metre of the bedrooms, and that 2 bedrooms can share a smoke alarm, but don't just bank on the smoke alarms being placed in a bedroom, because if the door's shut and then the smoke doesn't reach and it doesn't come under, it may be too late once the alarm goes off. By the time the smoke gets into that room, there may be no way out. We would expect no less than an annual inspection by synods if it's a parsonage, and ideally 3 monthly for standard rentals. You may decide it's 6 months. 6 monthly will work for you, especially if it's a very new building and you have a good tenant. You might decide, oh, actually 6 months, 6 monthly inspections are fine. You need to have the building insurance in place for new builds, and you may decide to have an existing property that's been refurbished revalued, because it may have, the value may have increased significantly, and you want to ensure that that is insured for the replacement value, what it will cost. The gas appliance inspections are every 2 years. The heat pump service, is annual, and also using reputable contractors. can also help because to ensure that sometimes it's false economy to get the cheapest. It's always better to get someone who's going to actually do the job and complete it correctly, and it's going to last as long as you need it to. You need the completion certificates for maintenance works, electrical, gas, which is again your electrical, gas and plumbing, with the PS documents as well, and just an awareness of and controls for hazards within the building. The other areas for the tenancy services, healthy homes requirements, that heating must be adequate for the size of the property, of the building. Draft stopping, there can't be any drafts throughout the building, or heating escaping through drafty windows. Drainage has to be good. You can't have area flooding every time it rains. And moisture control inside or condensation inside also needs to be controlled. Quite often a heat pump will take care of that. Double glazing definitely does. But where you have a building that retains moisture, it's not fun to live in, and it can lead to health problems.
And that's also the vent in the kitchen and bathroom, isn't it, for moisture control, venting there?
Yes, it is, ventilation as well. That's right, Trudy.
Yeah. So all the information on healthy homes is on our website. It's not yet been incorporated into bricks and mortar, but the next version of bricks and mortar, it will include it. So talking about the hazard awareness and controls on a building, it's a continuation of the construction projects diagram, where we still have that responsibility to coordinate and cooperate with the contractors that come onto site, that there's shared knowledge of the hazards that either the contractor's bringing onto site or that we already know exist on site. So they don't need to go hunting for the hazards. We should be able to tell them that. The Health and Safety at Work Act applies even to residential buildings, because it doesn't apply to the person living there, but when a contractor comes onto that property, or when our volunteers go onto that property for church business, then it becomes a work site. So that's why the Health and Safety at Work Act applies whenever we visit there. So we're just going to go through a couple of incidents that occurred. This one was a most unfortunate incident. This is the Christchurch Gas Explosion that occurred a few years ago. In this instance, there was over $5 million worth of damage done, which far exceeded the public liability insurance that the contractor had. 6 houses were deemed uninhabitable, and the owners had no control over the work. They had no understanding of what needed to be done to make it safe. And this is where we, as the building managers, or the stewards, the building stewards, we need to understand the work so that we can actively participate in helping to keep it safe, the entire site safe and people safe. So in this instance, the gas worker didn't cap the gas off after ongoing work on the property. And that's, when I say ongoing work, it's over a number of days. At no stage did he cut the gas off, which perhaps he should have. Hindsight's wonderful, perhaps he should have. But he also didn't discuss the work with the client. So that's what I said before, is just because we've hired reputable people, and this gas worker had the knowledge and the license and so on, but he and the client didn't have that conversation about how to keep the site safe. And unfortunately, this happened. So while there's different degrees of duty between a citizen homeowner and a contractor, we need to be practicing and exercising a greater level of care. So we need to have those conversations with the contractors that come onto site. It's the same as the Lower North Island Synod parish that I was talking about, where they smelt gas and they shut the site down for the day. That particular instance, WorkSafe should have been notified, because gas incidents are a notifiable action. And it comes down to the story of everybody, somebody, nobody. Everybody thought that somebody else had done it, but nobody had actually done it. What should have kept everybody safe is if there was actually a certificate to say the gas had been shut off properly. So it just comes back down to that paperwork side of it, that once you have that piece of paper certifying that the work's been done, you then share that knowledge with the other people that are in the equation. So moving on to we've spoken about the residential properties. They're generally guided by the tenancy services work. When it comes to the non-residential, what tends to drive the non-residential compliance comes down to health and safety and the building warrant of fitness and the fire and emergency work with regards to evacuations. So we've been through a lot of these items already on previous webinars, emergency response plans, September and October last year, and we finalised that little series in February this year. We've spoken about the asbestos management in the August webinar. With the asbestos management, again, it's just informing people that are coming on site to work on the buildings for maintenance purposes what the status of the asbestos is on site. Property and maintenance inspections should be carried out by the parish unless you've got a commercial property manager on the building. Those inspection statuses are, or the inspection process is covered in bricks and mortar. Under the Health and Safety at Work Act, we also need to ensure that because it's a place of work generally, that we've got a staff room or staff room facilities for the people that work there, toilet facilities, all the basic human need issues in any building. Now, what we're going to look at in a little bit, sorry, Wendy.
I think, would you include access in that too, Trudy? Access to the building?
Access falls into the building warrant of fitness area, keeping it safe, but yes, absolutely, good access needs to be maintained for our non-residential buildings, and security too. And security probably is more a best practice aspect rather than a compliance aspect. So building warrant of fitness is, as I said earlier, not something that everybody gets into. The key thing in this, because I've mentioned it in the emergency response planning, is that one of the items on a building warrant of fitness is it talks about the maximum number of occupants that can be in the building. And that's based a little bit on the entry exit points. How fast could we safely evacuate the building? If you've got 300 people and you've got a single person door for everybody to get out of, it's not likely to work. So hygiene facilities need to be able to accommodate the number of people that are in the building. And there's some other calculations in the Building Act that I'm unfamiliar with. So this is generally what a building warrant of fitness looks like. It's a 1 A4 page. It's an annual certification that must be displayed for public viewing. This particular form is Form 12, Section 10B of the Building Act. Now, normally I don't run around calling a document Form 12, but there's other documents that sit in behind them. So Form 12 is the one that, it's the ring that rules them all, if you like, from Lord of the Rings. This is the document that summarises that all the other documents are in place. Now, the main area of interest in Form 12 is the list of systems. The list of systems comes from a compliance schedule that you get with your documents from the council when they give you code of compliance. And these systems are requirements that the building consent process puts upon the building way back at stage 2 of the building process that we've just spoken about. The systems represent the safety features of the building. So for example, SS2 emergency warning systems, that's the sirens in your building. Can the sirens be heard from every area within the building so that people know to evacuate when the siren sounds? Automatic doors or access control doors are not just your entry doors, they could be the fire controlled doors. So if you've seen those big heavy doors that get held open with those magnet latches, they're automatic doors, and that when the fire alarm goes off, they're supposed to pop those magnets or release them so that the fire doors will close and allow for fire separation in them. So this is the compliance schedule, or what it looks like for Langdons Road. As I said, it's issued as part of the consent process. It specifies the inspection, maintenance and reporting procedures for the systems and features that are indicated. And each anniversary, it's necessary to lodge a completed Form 12 with the council. And it's to be completed by an independent qualified person. So that's an IQP. If you end up dealing with building warrant of fitnesses, that's what an IQP is, independent qualified person. Generally, the councils have a list of IQPs, so you can check out whether a certain company is certified to do the work that's needed for that particular system, safety system in your building. You cannot certify your own building. The idea of being independent is that you're at arm's length, that you're not, you know, that would be like me signing off my own set of accounts. If I want to prove that they're good accounts, then you get an independent person to sign it off. So within the compliance schedule for any safety system in your building, this is the sort of thing that you'll be looking at. It will describe the doors, the standard to which, or it will describe the item, the standard to which the item must be constructed or installed. It will describe the location and what sort of system that the schedule is talking about. And it will describe what maintenance needs to be done for the purpose of the building warrant of fitness. It will indicate the frequency of the inspections and who's allowed to do it. So there's some things that can be done by us as the owners, but other things need to be done by independent qualified people. Older buildings may not have a building warrant of fitness because they won't have these systems that need to be checked, or they may not have been entered onto the council system to be included in the building warrant of fitness. So your building may have an alarm and not have a fire alarm, but it may not have a building warrant of fitness because of its age. It might not have hit the council's registers. So individual systems may have specialty IQPs doing their sign-off. And then there'll be an additional IQP who collates all of those sign-offs together for the annual certification process. Individual systems could be checked monthly, 2 monthly, 6 monthly, or annually as the council's compliance schedule specifies. And the individual certifications will be made on Form 12A. So that's why I start referring to the form numbers in this instance. The individual sign-offs are Form 12A and the annual sign-off is Form 12. And this is what an Form 12A looks like. In this instance, this is for the specified system 3/1 is the automatic doors at Langdons Road. And the piece that makes this a little bit different from 12A is the sign-off area really highlights what it's for. They must name who they are as an IQP and the company that they work for. And there's the number of that person as well. So when you go onto a council website to see who the IQP people are in your area, this is the sort of information that you should be gathering, that they're allowed to do this form of sign-off. And that is what we have to talk about today. Now we have some questions that we have here, and we'll just work our way through those questions. Wendy, I'll just stop sharing the screen. There we are. Yep.
Someone asked a bit about heritage churches. Can you tell me, please, a heritage church listed building, or e.g. church is dated? I'm assuming that what you're saying is, what's the date when a building becomes a heritage building? Well, it's not actually the date. It's actually about the architectural significance of that building. So in Napier, we will be looking at some of the lovely Art Deco buildings there that will have a heritage status because they are special, and and they need to be protected for the future so that they're still there in the future. So it's if we look at what that actually means, a heritage building means it's a structure that requires preservation because of its historical, architectural, cultural, aesthetic, and ecological value. Hope that answers your question.
And the next one, I think that's for you, Wendy.
I think they all are. I understand that conference last year emphasised the importance of climate justice and action to the church. What are the applications for property projects in relation to adhering to climate or green buildings issues? Is this something MCPC will be looking at in the future? That's a very good question, and in actual fact they are. On the 22nd of March, MCPC are meeting to specifically just discuss climate justice and the future for the church buildings within the and the importance of climate justice, and just how they want to treat buildings from go to woe, from start to finish, green buildings, etc. What are they going to embrace for the future for the church to address climate change? The next question is, would the Methodist Church be in a position to act as a guarantor for a building project if they were asked to? Well, actual fact, I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to give that to Trudy.
This is not something that I'd normally deal with, but I would say no.
Oh, so someone has said Trudy Downs would like to answer this question live. Someone else written that, Trudy. I thought you did. In that case, I will. So sometimes the board of administration is asked to be guarantor for a project, but this would be an extremely expensive, maybe a reasonably risky program, and a complex program. A good example of this would be the Everil Orr retirement village that takes up a whole block in Auckland, and it's significant. It's up to stage 5 now, I think, and yeah, it's a very expensive project. So the bank had asked for the Board of Administration to be guarantor. Now they were happy to be guarantor for this project because it's a proved model. EDL Property Trust are involved, and they are extremely good at this type of project. Tamahiri are as well. So it's called a proven model. Generally, a lot of pre-sales before definitely before the construction's finished. So, and I know that Tamahiri always have a waiting list. For smaller projects, you wouldn't be asking for a guarantor. Now, I'm a bit confused with this. I have inherited no evidence of the Greendale Methodist Church roof being repaired. I've tried with no success. If the Methodist Church has evidence of the work being completed, hence the Selwyn Council placed an enter at your own risk into the church on September 2015. My thinking is that the Methodist Church did not receive the document saying that the work was completed, as it appears that the Methodist Church has been through the paper trail. I remember this, Lynn Marie, and we looked through the property files twice, which is the only place that we would store the documentation or sign off. So whoever was involved with the project management the roof repair, I would expect that they would know where those documents are if they're still around. My suggestion is that you get a builder in to see if the work was carried out, because they can have a look at the roof and how that's looking, what's been repaired. But I'd also be wanting to see the scope of works to see what was required. So if parishes don't give us the documentation, we can't hold it and we don't have it. I would assume if a roof needed to be repaired because it was seismically compromised, that would require a consent. That's my thinking, and that the council may be correct that it may not have been repaired.
Would it be possible to search the accounts or the funds to see if a payment had gone out for roofers for the parish?
Yes, we could do, but we're looking at 2015 and we keep those, we might be able to, 7 years we keep those.
So if we get in shortly, we should still be able to see them.
So long as we know who the contractor was.
Yeah.
Because they are filed under the name. But we could look at the CBNL account for Greendale, maybe, or for Selwyn, and to see if there were payments around that time. That's a very good suggestion, Trudy.
Excellent. I'll answer this one, Wendy. So Julie asks if there's requirements around tag and testing of electrical equipment. I'll take this on two different scenarios. If you've got construction equipment on a construction site, all electrical equipment must be tested and tagged every 3 months if it's going to be used on site. So that's even if you've got a battery charger, because all of your tools are battery powered, the battery charger's got to be tested and tagged every 3 months. If you're talking about office equipment, so if you're talking about your parish office, you need to do a risk assessment of your equipment. So if you've got all brand new equipment and you've got excellent electrical wiring, then the risk is very low and you could possibly get away with every 2 years for tagging and testing your electrical equipment. If you're running multi-boards for your power, which I wouldn't recommend, but let's face it, we do it, then you might consider, is it a domestic board versus a commercial board versus construction multi-boxes are probably the best ones. That's part of your risk assessment. Is the equipment good or not? The less good it is, the more often you should test it and get it tagged as being compliant. If moving on from multi-boards, all of your other equipment probably should be tested and tagged, but again, how long between the testing and tagging will depend on how often do you unplug it and replug it in. For example, your TV at home is probably plugged in and never unplugged. Therefore, you shouldn't have to test and tag it too often because you're not playing around with it. The only thing that's likely to go wrong with the cabling is if you've got power surges running through the entire system. So yes, you should test and tag it, and the time frame on it will be based on a risk assessment around how good the equipment is that you're using and how often it's used and where it's used.
The next one is regarding rural communities. Churches are left unlocked. I think that's part of the culture of churches too, is that they are unlocked, that the access is always available. So, and this person is saying, I myself do not approve. Some churches are open, say, from 9 a.m. unattended, then someone locks it at 5. And that is sometimes common practice. I think with COVID, a lot of churches have remained locked and unused, vacant, and yeah, so this person is also saying since the traffic light orange and level 2, they've kept their main church locked, and that she suggests that perhaps we should keep churches locked. There's a for and against for that argument, and I think you'll find that there'd be a number of people that will be mortified that the church wasn't open to the public.
I think particularly with COVID and that it's been mandated that all our church buildings require vaccine passes. The parish should look at its policy, because if the church is unlocked and people without vaccine passes are wandering in and out unchecked, then something needs to be done about that. Vaccine passes may only be in use for another 4 months at the most, sort of thing. So it also depends on the safety of the location. Certainly if you're a central city church, then not having managed entry exit on your buildings would be considered unsafe. But for the more rural communities, it may be okay. You would best know how often people are visiting, and you need to be looking at the reasons why you'd be locking the door. Some places it may be okay, and others it might not. So I think if you want to follow up on this, Marie, that if you phone us through and discuss the circumstances for your church, that may be a better way of getting a specific answer on that.
And that ends our questions. Thank you, Auntie Lynn, for your nice words, and also Silly RC.
Excellent.
I think you need to. Thank you. And just remember that the webinar will be available online shortly after tomorrow.
And our next topic on the 12th of April is about insurance and property, wellness and safety for uniting parishes. If you've got any other feedback or topic suggestions for future webinars, please let us know. We'll try and keep the topics topical to what's happening, but it's got to be something better than COVID. Again, thank you for your time and for attending.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.